The TriBall. Likely IronCAD's most famous tool, and for good reason. Once you get familiar with using the TriBall, it's incredibly powerful, and probably unlike anything you've ever seen in another CAD system before. The TriBall can be used to position features, parts, assemblies, all in an extremely quick and easy to understand way when compared to traditional mating and constraining techniques. You can pattern things with the TriBall or directly edit geometry. Let's have a look at a few examples of the TriBall being used, and then we'll dig a little deeper into the anatomy of the TriBall and what each area of the TriBall does. In this example, I'd like to pattern this hole feature around my part. I'll select down onto the hole, activate the TriBall with the Q key or this button up here. Then I'll press the space bar and I'll drag the center of the TriBall while holding the shift key to snap to the center of this rim. Note I could also simply right click on the center of the TriBall and click to center point to achieve the same thing. Then I'll lock down the TriBall by pressing the space bar, select this vertical axis, and then right click and drag in the spherical area of the TriBall, let go, and then select create radial pattern. Here I'll type in 20 to create 20 instances of this hole, and then type 360 divided by 20 to automatically calculate my angle. As you can see, we now have those holes patterned around the TriBall. And because this is a linked pattern, we can change any of these holes and have the rest update for us. In this example here, I'd like to align these two features on the blue part to the black part. I'll select down onto the two features, holding down the shift key, then activate the TriBall. And with one quick move, I'm going to align this handle on the TriBall to be perpendicular to this face, which will align our features. In this plant layout here, I'm going to zoom into one of these assemblies, select down onto it, reposition it to make more space, and then right click and drag and select link here to create a linked copy. In this imported model, I'm going to use the TriBall to directly edit the model. I'll select down onto this outside face, activate the TriBall, and now I'm going to move that face, in this case 6 mm out in this direction. I'm also going to rotate the face, in this case by 15 degrees. Then I'll click OK, and as you can see, the geometry is updated to fit where I moved the face to. In this example, I have a 3D printable fabric. Now I'd like to create a pattern of this fabric so that it's a lot larger. I'll select onto the fabric, activate the TriBall. Now I'm going to right click and drag on this plane here to create a rectangular pattern along that plane. I'll let go and then select create rectangular pattern, and I'll choose to have 10 in this direction, and they'll be at a distance of 22. In this direction I'll choose to have 5, also at a distance of 22. Then I'll click OK. And as you can see, my pattern has been created. And we can go in and edit that pattern as well. For example, I'll reduce this side or direction that's currently 10 to be 7. Let's go to a more simple example here to dig a little deeper into the TriBall. I'm going to drag and drop out a cut cylinder onto this part, and then I'm going to resize that cylinder to 10 mm. Now let's say we'd like to move this cylinder to each corner of our part. I'll activate the TriBall. Now I can right click on the center point here and select create multiple copies/links, link to point/center point using cursor. And now I can go around and click on the points I'd like to place it. Just like that. Now we have a linked hole in each corner. Well, let's look at another example. I'll activate the TriBall, and then I'll press the space bar to use the TriBall as in reference mode. And then I'll snap to this midpoint. You can see we get an automatic snap there. And then I'll press the space bar to lock the TriBall down again, right click on this handle, and create a mirror link. And then I'll hold down the shift key and select both holes and do the same in the other direction. Now let's have a look at what each handle does on the TriBall. I'm going to move one of these holes into the center, and we'll start to move it around. These handles on the outside are used for positioning along their axis. And you can type in specific values, or just leave it as an approximate value. That's with a left click drag on those handles. With a right click drag on those handles, we get the option to create a move, which is just what we would get when we did the left click. We get the option to create a copy, which is an unlinked copy of the existing item. So basically they'll be different, so one can be resized. And in fact, I'll do that one here just to demonstrate. I'll create a copy at 15 mil away. Now you can see each of these can be a different size. Whereas with these ones, we created a linked copy so that they all remain the same size. Now let's go back into where we were. We can also create a linear pattern if we'd like to, which is similar to the option we chose on the 3D printable part, except this is just a pattern in one direction instead of a rectangular pattern. When you create a pattern, you'll then be able to edit that pattern later. For example, I'll create 3 of these at 15 millimeters apart. Now at any stage I can come in here and I can double click and change the number or the distance. And I'll delete that pattern for now. That's what the outside handles do. Now the outside planes allow you to position only on a plane. So while these handles later only position on an axis like that, and note you can lock them down at any stage, like I am here. So I've locked that axis down, and I'm going to drag this to this face, dragging the center point, and that's now actually locked my positioning to only go in that axis. For example, I could lock this axis and get it to go to the midpoint of this edge here, using that axis as the locked one. So for example, if I did that midpoint, and then also this midpoint, it would be at the center of our part, because we locked one axis. So you can see if we lock this one, then it can only move in that direction. If we lock this one, it can only move in that direction. We can also lock the planes as well. So if we lock that plane, we can now drag this around and it will only move around on that plane. It can't go up or down. Or we could click onto this plane and drag around, and you can see it will only move along that plane there. It can go up or down, and it can go left or right, but it can't go forward and backwards in that direction. I'm going to lock this vertical axis and drag this to the top face here. You can also right click and drag on the planes, and that will give you options to move, copy, link, or create a rectangular pattern, as we did earlier on the 3D printable part. Generally on the TriBall, there are quick options when you use left click, and then there are more detailed options when you use right click. Now let's get to the internal handles, and those handles are used for alignment or mirroring. Let's have a look here. If we place this hole onto this face, maybe we want it to cut across instead of cutting down. So what we could do is we could lock down this axis, and we could rotate this and then type in 90 degrees, hit enter, and that would rotate it 90 degrees just like that, where we want it to go. And I'm going to press undo there and take it back to where we were. Actually, no, I'll bring it back to where we were here. And in that example, we used a rotate around that axis, but we could also use the internal handles here. We can right click on those and align them. So we can align, for example, perpendicular to face. So I could align perpendicular to this face here. And note, with that right click alignment that I just did, we can also do the same thing with just dragging on the handle. TriBall often has options to do things even more efficiently, just with a quick drag like that. And in this case, let's actually make it perpendicular to here and make it cut across our model like that. The other option which you saw me demonstrate earlier is the mirror option using these handles. So I'll press the space bar and I'll drag the center point of the TriBall to this center point here. Note you can also hold down the shift key and it will automatically snap the TriBall to center points and end points, whichever you're closer to on the line. And note as well, like with many other options, you can right click and see more details. So we can, for example, right click and align this to the midpoint of edge, select the edge, and it will automatically find the midpoint for us. Now with the TriBall in position, I'm going to press the spacebar to lock it down, take it out of reference mode. Now these internal handles can be used to create a mirror. I can right click and do a mirror here. And the mirror will be in the direction of the handle you select. So if we did it with this one, it would mirror the hole here to over here. There's no geometry there, so there's not much point. So we're going to mirror with this handle. I'll right click, create a mirror, and a link. Okay, now let's move on to the center of the TriBall. And this is likely the most powerful area of the TriBall. I'm going to reposition the TriBall here just quickly, and then show you a few different options using the center of the TriBall here. As you can see, we can simply drag an item around using the center like that. It's really quick and easy. We can reposition it. We can hold down the shift key and snap to different points like that midpoint of that edge. Or if we hover over a curve here like this, we can hold down the shift key to snap to the center point of that. We can also right click on the center and select to create multiple copies / links. So we can then create, for example, links to point using cursor, and then we can simply click and place a new hole everywhere we click. And in this case, we're placing new holes. It doesn't have to be holes, that could be assemblies or other parts. It could be something incredibly complicated. It doesn't have to be a simple hole like we're copying here. Another thing you can do with the center of the TriBall is you can choose to position the TriBall using multiple selections. So let's have a look at another example where maybe we want to align the TriBall diagonally here. So you can see currently it's aligned in this direction and in this direction, but maybe for some reason we'd like to align it diagonally. So in this case, I'm going to right click in the center and select to position it between 2 points. So I'm going to go to midpoint of point to point. And I'll select this point here and this point here. And the TriBall will be exactly in the middle of those 2 points, but it's not yet aligned. Now I'm going to right click on this axis. It could be this one too, or this one. I'm going to right click here and then align this axis point to point as well, between this point and this point. Oops, I missed the point selection there. Let me try that again. This point and this point. And there we go. Now we can move in a diagonal way there. So we're now dragging the linear axis of the TriBall in a diagonal way. Note we can also align the TriBall to the global coordinate system. You simply right click an empty space and then select Orient TriBall to global. So for example here, I'm going to press the space bar and actually align it to global while it's in reference mode, which is often a very useful way of doing it. So you're not actually moving the object, you're just getting the TriBall aligned to what you want. So I'll right click and select Orient to global. As you can see, it's now oriented to the global coordinates, which happen to be the same as the part we have here. I'm going to hover over here and hold on the Shift key. So I'm just dragging the center there of the TriBall, holding the Shift key to snap it into place. One thing that's very good to get used to with the TriBall is using the center of the TriBall and using the handles without right-clicking. It's a very productive way of using the TriBall. For example, let's delete these holes here and have a look at just using the center. I'll activate the TriBall. I can right-click and drag, hold on the Shift key, and just select link here. Create a link, that hole there. I can select onto this one, do the same over here, holding down the Shift key, and I'm only dragging the center here. We can very quickly create copies of items, just using the center there. Link here with both of those selected to create the other holes there. And let's select onto this one. You can also edit the distance from a point, and this is especially useful with the outside handles here. So let's delete the holes that we currently have. Maybe delete these blends, and well, I'll delete this side hole as well for now. And we'll position the TriBall into the corner with an offset. So I'm going to position this hole here, and I'm going to right-click on this handle, or maybe I'll drag it with the center point approximately where I want it to go to start, which can be a useful thing to do. And I'm going to right-click and select Edit Distance from Point. Then I'll select onto this face, or it could be this edge as well. It's going to be looking for stuff along this axis. So even if I select this edge, it'll only measure along an axis because I've locked that down. And I'm going to choose for that to be exactly 15 millimeters from that edge. I'm going to click on the other axis here to lock it down, then right click, select Edit Distance from Point. Click on this face, and again type 15, hit enter. Now we have it perfectly offset by 15 by 15. It's worth noting that here we're just using one simple part. But when you're using the TriBall on something more complicated, you can align between other parts and assemblies in your model. Earlier we looked at the option to create a link to a point or center point using the cursor. You can also use the TriBall to position items. So for example, we could use links using TriBall center. And then the TriBall goes into a special mode where we move it around. We press the P key on our keyboard to create a copy everywhere where we want to. Just pressing the P key there a few times and then press enter to finish. As you can see, they've now been positioned. And obviously in this case, we're positioning them in very simple locations, but sometimes we might have a very complicated assembly where we're driving around the assembly into really complicated positions and automatically placing new copies of an assembly or a part or something much more complicated than a simple hole like we have here. Let's jump back into the TriBall training model here. Just have a look at positioning the various parts that we have here, which are just kind of fun parts to reposition on our model. Let's start with this one. This one should go between those 2 points there. I'm going to activate the TriBall. First thing we want to do is flip it up the other way around. Now we could lock down this axis, rotate it around and type 180 and that would flip it up. I'm going to press Ctrl Z though to undo that. We could also right click and do reverse. That'll flip it upside down as well. Now, one thing to think about is what would you like to use as the reference for the positioning of your object? What's going to be quick? And as you get more familiar with the TriBall, you get more familiar with what are good things to use as references. As we can see by where this is going to go, this part's going to sink into this part a little bit. And where we have this currently on the bottom there is not a very useful positioning area for the TriBall to be in, because then we have to go and snap down there. It's a little bit harder. What we can use instead is we can press the space bar to put the TriBall in reference mode, hold down the Shift key and snap to this center point, space bar to lock the TriBall down again, then I'm going to hold down the Shift key again, just dragging the center point, and snap to there. Now you're likely wondering how we're going to align this. I'm going to lock down that vertical axis, and I'm going to right click here and select to center point. So it's going to align this axis, which is currently pointing that way, to the center point. And I'll select onto the hole here. In this case, it's actually going in the, still aligning to that center point, but it's going in the, not the direction that I want. So I'm actually just going to flip that 180 degrees around. Let's have a look at this example, which needs to go into here. I'm going to activate the TriBall, and again I'm going to position the TriBall into an area which is useful as a reference. So I'll press the space bar to make the TriBall white. I'm going to drag it to this bottom edge here, this bottom point, and you'll see why in a moment. I'm going to press the space bar to make the TriBall blue, drag it into this bottom right corner. Then I'm going to align this edge just by dragging it to this edge. That's got two of my alignment options done. And now I'm going to drag this alignment handle here to this face. There we have that aligned. Of course, I'm going at a slower pace here to help explain it along the way. Once you get familiar with using the TriBall, you can operate at an extremely fast pace. That was just 3 main moves there to position that and put it into place. And when you're going at a fast pace, you can do that extremely quickly. Let's have a look at this one here. I'm going to activate the TriBall, and then I'm going to position this just by dragging and holding the Shift key to the center of that circle there. Now we need to align this. So I'm going to right click and select parallel to axis. On this axis of the TriBall, I'm going to go parallel to the axis of this. Just like that. And then we can now drop this in here. So I'm going to choose or change the reference, choose a better reference for the TriBall to use. I'm going to hit the space bar, now move it up to the top here. Space bar again. Now I'm going to lock this vertical axis so that it can't go in any other direction, and then just drag to here. Now, a good example of why I locked that axis is that if I left it non-locked and I dragged to there, then the whole shape would move, which is obviously not what we want. So we want to lock it so it can only go down, and then say, okay, only going in that downwards direction, go down to that face. Now we'd like to align this part of the model here to this part. So I'll lock down that vertical axis again. Then I'm going to align this to point, and then choose this point here. And actually that's flipped around the wrong way in that case, so I'm just going to rotate that 180 degrees, or we could reverse as well. Next up we have this part, and I'll go through this one a little bit quicker. I'm simply going to activate the TriBall, move it into my good reference position that I'd like to use, which is that one there, drag it over here to the reference I'd like to use on this. Then I'm going to rotate this into the position I want it to be in here, and then I'm just going to drag over to here, and we have that in position. It's good to remember with the TriBall that you can right click on options to see a few more details, to make things a little bit easier to understand. You can right click on this internal handle. These are the alignment handles. This means align to point, align to center point, align to the midpoint of an edge, or point to point, and so on. And you can do a reverse or a mirror. If we right click on the external handles, we can move. So these are for moving. So external handles for moving, internal handles are for aligning. So here we can right click and we can move to point, to the center point, or to the midpoint of an edge, or we can edit distance from point, and so on. If we right click on a plane, you can see we can create multiple copies. We can go in and move to a point along that plane. So staying on that plane, move to a point, for example. And if we right click on the center, you can see more options here. For example, we'd like to just put this center at another point or a center point, and so on and so on. And we have that especially useful option to create multiple copies or links by selecting points. So as a quick reminder, I'll move the TriBall out of the way. And as a quick reminder, let's go in and just have a look at what each area does. The outside handles here and the outside planes are both for positioning, either along the axis of the handle or along the plane. The internal handles are for alignment and mirroring. And the center handle is for complete positioning with the TriBall. So you simply drag the center handle and drag it to points that you have on the model. That's how to use the TriBall command.